Human nuclear warheads exploded against the hulls of Betazoid warships, blasting open the alien metal hulls and sucking thousands of Betazoid warriors into the silent void of space as Joseph watched the flashes of human ships on the screen. It was 2487. Humanity had spread among the stars for centuries now, but not all aliens welcomed us in peace. The ruthless Betazoids attacked human colonies, slaughtering families from orbit. But today, humanity struck back. I am Joseph Simpson, Fleet Commander of Earth Defense. The Betazoid attacks left our outer settlements in ruins, debris fields of human stations, and gruesome images of destroyed escape pods floated on my screen. Betazoid leader Quasar declared humans unfit to exist beside his warrior race. Earth's best scientists reverse-engineered Betazoid tech from fallen ships, and High Command gave me the order. Take the fight to Betazoid space. Hit them at home. I scratched my beard, watching the nuclear explosions pop around my fleet. Direct hits. My human crews worked in frantic, organized chaos to reload torpedoes into tubes. Betazoid energy beams sliced one of the human frigates in half. Fuck. The Betazoids adapted to our weapons fast. Another Betazoid ship, shaped like a dark arrowhead, warped in behind my fleet. It eclipsed the stars, dwarfing our ships. New design. My eyes narrowed. All ships fire on the big one. Launch all nukes. I gripped the console. Sweat beaded on my forehead. My heart felt like a war drum in my chest. If this attack failed, Earth had no more ships to stop the Betazoids. They would bomb us back to the Stone Age from orbit. Humanity's existence among the stars hung on this battle. The Betazoid warship loomed. Our torpedoes raced toward it. My fingers trembled as they tapped across the screen. "Fire all torpedoes now, everything we've got!" I shouted to my weapons officer. I held my breath as the torpedoes raced toward the massive Betazoid dreadnought. We had them now. But before our torpedoes could connect, the hulking ship disappeared into hyperspace with a flash. Our warheads detonated in empty vacuum. I slammed my fist down. Damn it! They jumped. Tracked their hyperspace signature. We're going after them. They won't get away from us that easy. I ordered my navigator to punch the coordinates into our hyperdrives. The Betazoid warship was heading right for the Vega system, one of their core worlds. I gritted my teeth as our ship accelerated into the swirling blue vortex of hyperspace. My crew looked to me with silent questions. They knew as well as I did that this was likely a one-way trip. The Betazoids were leading us right to the heart of their empire. But we couldn't let them escape. This was our chance to strike a decisive blow, to make them pay for every human life they had taken. Hours passed as we hurtled through the void. The tension on the bridge was palpable. My sensor officer's brow furrowed as his screen beeped. "Sir, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming from a nearby star system." I walked over to look at his display. He was right. The signal was weak, but it was there, and it was coming from a star system directly in our path. I rubbed my chin, a war raging in my own mind now. We had our orders. We had to complete our mission. But whoever was sending that signal, they needed help, and wasn't that what we were fighting for? To protect the innocent from the Betazoid's cruelty? I sighed and made my choice. Drop us out of hyperspace. We're investigating that signal. My helmsman nodded and cut the hyperdrive. The blue tunnel collapsed into star lines, then resolved into a vista of space and destruction. Before us was a planet, its surface scarred by bombardment. Betazoid ships swarmed around it like angry wasps, but they weren't the ones firing. They were the ones being fired upon. Strange angular ships darted among the Betazoid fleet, unleashing volleys of searing energy beams. The Betazoid ships returned fire, but they were outmatched. Whoever this new race was, their technology was beyond anything I had ever seen. One of their ships, a massive dagger-shaped battleship, sliced a Betazoid cruiser in half with a single shot. My science officer spoke up, his voice shaking. "Sir, I've identified the attacking ships. They match the profile of a species known as the Zorgons. Highly advanced, highly aggressive. They've enslaved a dozen races in the Gamma Quadrant. I watched the carnage unfold on the view screen, my mind reeling. The Betazoids, the scourge of humanity, the monsters I had come to destroy, they were being slaughtered. Despite everything they had done to us, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. They were outmatched, just as we had been. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened a comm channel to the fleet. "This is Fleet Commander Simpson. All ships, engage the Zorgon fleet. Defend the Betazoids. I repeat, defend the Betazoids." Shocked silence greeted my order. Then one by one my captains acknowledged. Our ships swung into formation, aligning ourselves with the battered Betazoid fleet, our weapons powered up, locking onto Zorgon ships. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here we were, ready to fight and die alongside our greatest enemy. But in the face of this new threat, old hatreds seemed petty. The Zorgons would enslave us all if they won here today. Human, Betazoid. It didn't matter. Today, we were allies. The Zorgon ships turned toward us, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. I gripped the arms of my chair, my heart pounding. "All ships, fire at will. Let's show these Zorgon bastards what humans and Betazoids can do together." My fleet and the Betazoid ships fought together, human and alien crews working as one, to hold back the Zorgon onslaught. But even our combined strength was being pushed to its limits. The Zorgon flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons, cut through our forces like a hot knife through butter, its advanced shield shrugging off our most powerful attacks. I gripped the armrests of my command chair, my knuckles turning white. We were losing ships fast, human and Betazoid alike. At this rate, there would be nothing left of either of our fleets. My mind raced, trying to find a solution, a weakness to exploit. Then it hit me. The flagship. It was the key, take that out, and the Zorgon fleet would be thrown into disarray. But how our weapons couldn't scratch it? It would take a miracle. Suddenly, alarms blared on the bridge. "Collision alert!" my tactical officer shouted. I whipped my head around to see a damaged Betazoid fighter, trailing smoke and sparks, hurtling straight towards our view screen. "Brace for impact!" I yelled, gripping my chair. But at the last second, the fighter veered away, missing us by mere meters. As it passed, I caught a glimpse of the pilot through the cockpit canopy. My eyes widened. It was Quasar, the Betazoid leader himself. A burst of static came over the comm. "Commander Simpson!" Quasar's voice crackled, strained but determined. "It seems I owe you my thanks. Your intervention saved many Betazoid lives today." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. Quasar thanking a human, but I pushed my surprise aside. There were more pressing matters. "Don't mention it," I replied gruffly. "But we've got a bigger problem. That flagship is tearing us apart. We need to take it down." There was a pause. Then Quasar spoke again. "Agreed, I have a plan, but it will require cooperation between our forces. A joint strike team to board the dreadnought and destroy it from within." I hesitated for only a moment. The idea of working side by side with Betazoids after all the blood that had been spilled between our races, it was almost unthinkable. But then, I looked at the view screen, at the Zorgon ships pressing their attack, and I knew Quasar was right. Divided we would fall, but together, we might have a chance. "I'm in," I said. "Let's do this." Minutes later, I was leading a mixed team of human and Betazoid soldiers through the corridors of the Zorgon flagship, the hull shuddering around us from the battle raging outside. Quasar was at my side, his plasma rifle spitting fire as we cut down Zorgon troops. It was surreal, fighting alongside the being who had been my nemesis for so long. But in the heat of battle, our differences seemed to melt away. We were soldiers, warriors, united by a common cause. We fought our way to the reactor core, planting explosive charges on the pulsing heart of the dreadnought. As we made our way back to our boarding craft, the ship shook with internal detonations, the Zorgons in disarray as their flagship tore itself apart from within. In the chaos of our escape, as human and Betazoid ships pulled away from the dying Zorgon dreadnought, I found myself reflecting on the strange turns life can take. Yesterday, I would have given anything to see Quasar and his kind wiped from the stars. But today I had fought by his side, trusted him with my life. War makes for strange bedfellows, they say. But perhaps there's more that unites us than divides us. Perhaps in the face of a greater threat, even the oldest of enemies can find common ground. The Zorgon flagship exploded behind us, a brilliant flash of light that filled the view screen. Cheers erupted on the bridge, human and Betazoid voices joined in celebration. I looked to Quasar, meeting his gaze across the chaos. He nodded to me, a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement. There would be much to discuss in the days ahead, treaties to be negotiated, wounds to be healed. But for now, in this moment of victory, I allowed myself a smile. We had done the impossible today, not as humans or Betazoids, but as something more, as allies, as friends. The battle still raged around us, Zorgon ships reeling but not yet defeated. We had struck a blow, but the war was far from over. I turned back to my crew, my resolve hardened by the challenges we had faced and overcome. "All right, people, let's finish this," I said, my voice ringing with newfound determination. "We've got a galaxy to save." As the remains of the Zorgon flagship drifted in the void, Joseph allowed himself a moment of relief. The tide had turned. The Zorgons were in disarray, their fleet scattering. But even as cheers rang out across the bridge, a chill ran down Joseph's spine. Something was wrong. On the view screen, the surface of the Betazoid colony was changing. A sickly green haze was spreading across the cities, the forests, the plains. People were stumbling in the streets, collapsing, their bodies twisting in agony. "What the hell is happening down there?" Joseph demanded, his voice tight. It was Quasar who answered, his face ashen. "It's a bioweapon," he said, his voice shaking. "The Zorgons, they must have released it as a last resort. It's killing my people." Joseph stared at the screen, horror and realization dawning in equal measure. He had seen this before. Decades ago, the Zorgons had used a similar weapon against human colonies. The death toll had been catastrophic. We have no defense against this," Quasar said, his usual bravado gone. "Our medical technology, it's not advanced enough." Joseph closed his eyes, the weight of a decision pressing down on him. When he opened them, they were filled with resolve. "We do," he said quietly. "Humanity. We developed a cure after the Zorgons used this against us. It was costly, but we have it." Quasar looked at him, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. You would share this with us after everything?" Joseph nodded. "No one deserves this, not even our enemies." The conversation with Earth's leaders was tense. There were those who argued against helping the Betazoids, who saw this as a chance to let a hated enemy perish. But Joseph argued passionately, his conviction unwavering. This was about more than politics, more than war. This was about life, about the basic decency that separated them from the monsters they fought. In the end, the decision was made. The cure would be shared. Human medical ships descended on the Betazoid colony, working side by side with Betazoid doctors to distribute the life-saving treatment. Joseph watched from orbit as the green haze slowly dissipated, as people stopped dying in the streets. It was a strange feeling to know that they had saved the lives of those they had once fought to destroy. But as Joseph watched human and Betazoid working together, he felt a glimmer of hope. If they could do this, if they could put aside their differences in the face of a greater crisis, perhaps there was a chance for peace after all. The battle still raged in the skies above. The Zorgons, even in their defeat, fought on with desperate ferocity. But for a moment Joseph allowed himself to believe that this could be a turning point, not just in the war, but in the history of their species. He turned back to his crew, to Quasar at his side. There was still work to be done, still a fight to be won. But for now, they had shown that compassion could be a weapon as powerful as any laser or torpedo. The Zorgon ships regrouped, preparing for another assault. Joseph straightened in his chair, his resolve hardened by the challenges they had faced, the choices they had made. "All right, people," he said, his voice ringing with determination. "Let's finish this fight." The Zorgon ships regrouped, preparing for another assault. Joseph straightened in his chair, his resolve hardened by the challenges they had faced, the choices they had made. "All right, people," he said, his voice ringing with determination. "Let's finish this fight." But even as the words left his mouth, a new alarm sounded on the bridge. "Commander," his security officer shouted. "Intruder alert on the Betazoid colony. Zorgon infiltration team detected." Joseph's blood ran cold. How had they slipped past their defenses? He turned to Quasar, but the Betazoid leader was already rising from his seat, his face a mask of fury. "They're going after our leaders," Quasar growled, "trying to cripple us while we're vulnerable." Joseph was about to respond when a new message flashed across his screen. His eyes widened in shock as he read the words. "Quasar. They've taken Quasar. The infiltration team. They have him." For a moment the bridge was silent. Then slowly Joseph rose from his chair. "Prep a shuttle," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm going after him." His crew stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, you can't," his first officer protested. "We need you here, commanding the fleet." But Joseph shook his head. "Quasar risked his life to fight beside us. I'm not abandoning him to the Zorgons." He turned, meeting the eyes of each of his bridge officers in turn. "I'm leaving you in command. Keep our people safe." With that, he strode from the bridge, a hand-picked team of human and Betazoid soldiers falling into step behind him. They boarded a shuttle, rocketing down towards the surface of the Betazoid moon where Quasar's tracking signal had last been detected. As they approached the coordinates, Joseph's eyes narrowed, a Zorgon base hidden beneath the moon's rocky surface. "Bring us in low," he ordered the pilot. "We'll jump from here." The shuttle swooped down, hovering just meters above the ground. Joseph and his team leaped out, weapons at the ready, as they stormed towards the base's entrance. Zorgon guards opened fire, energy bolts sizzling through the air, but Joseph's team was quick and lethal. They cut through the defenses, fighting their way into the heart of the base. As they raced through the corridors, alarms blaring all around them, they came to a sudden halt. Before them stood a towering Zorgon warrior, his armor gleaming in the dim light. "I am Xyloth," he snarled, his voice dripping with menace. "And you, Commander, have made a grave mistake." Joseph raised his rifle, but Xyloth was faster. He lunged forward, knocking the weapon from Joseph's hands and slamming him against the wall. They grappled in close quarters, trading blows with brutal force. But even as he fought, Joseph's mind was racing. Why had the Zorgons taken Quasar? What did they want with him? The answer came as they burst into the base's central chamber. Joseph's eyes widened in horror. Betazoid prisoners, strapped to examination tables, their bodies twisted and deformed. Zorgon scientists hovered over them, taking samples, making notes. "You're experimenting on them," Joseph gasped, realization dawning. "Trying to unlock the secrets of their physiology." Xyloth laughed, a cruel grating sound. "The Betazoids are the key to our victory," he sneered. "Their DNA, combined with our technology, we will create a new breed of soldier, unstoppable, invincible." Rage surged through Joseph's veins. He launched himself at Xyloth, all thoughts of guns and tactics forgotten. This was primal, a battle of strength and will. They crashed through the chamber, smashing equipment, trading blows that would have shattered bone. But Joseph fought with the fury of a man possessed. For every punch Xyloth landed, he returned two in kind. And then, with a final desperate effort, he had the Zorgon pinned, his hands wrapped around Xyloth's throat, squeezing. Until finally, the Zorgon went limp. Joseph staggered back, chest heaving, knuckles bruised and bloody. But he had no time to rest. He could hear Quasar's voice, weak but alive, calling out from a nearby cell. He raced over, wrenching open the door. Quasar looked up at him, battered and bruised, but alive. "Joseph," he rasped, You came for me." Joseph helped him to his feet, supporting his weight. "I couldn't leave you behind," he said simply. "Not after everything." Quasar's eyes met his, a newfound respect glimmering within. "I was wrong about you," he said softly. "About humanity. I see that now." Together they limped out of the cell, Joseph calling for his team to regroup. They had to get out of here, had to destroy this place and all its horrors. They moved through the base, planting explosives as they went. The Zorgon scientists fled, their grotesque experiments abandoned in the chaos. And then they were out, racing across the moon's surface as the base exploded behind them, a fireball rising into the starry sky. Joseph helped Quasar into the waiting shuttle, then turned to look back at the smoking ruins. So much had changed, he reflected, in such a short time. The lines between enemy and friend, between right and wrong, they had blurred and shifted. But one thing was clear. In this moment, watching the Zorgon base burn, Quasar at his side, he knew he had made the right choice. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them up and away from the moon's surface. Joseph sat back in his seat, exhaustion finally taking hold. But even as his eyes drifted closed, a small smile played across his lips. They had struck a blow against the Zorgons today, had shown that even the most bitter of enemies could find common ground. It was a strange journey that had brought him here, from soldier to commander, from enemy to rescuer. But as the shuttle soared through the stars, carrying him back to his ship and his crew, Joseph knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles remained to be fought, he would face them head-on, for his people, for his newfound allies. For the future they would build together. With the Zorgon base reduced to smouldering rubble and Quasar safe from their clutches, Joseph allowed himself a moment to breathe. But there was little time to rest. The war still raged among the stars, and the alliance between humans and Betazoids was tenuous at best. That's why, when the Betazoid High Council extended an invitation for Joseph and a delegation of human leaders to visit their homeworld, he knew he had to accept. This was a chance to forge a lasting peace, to build a future where their races could stand together against the threats that lurked in the galaxy. Joseph stepped off the shuttle onto the surface of the Betazoid homeworld, a planet of towering spires and gleaming cities. He was greeted by Quasar himself, who clasped his hand in a firm grip. "Welcome, Commander Simpson," Quasar said, his voice resonating with newfound respect. "Let us hope that this visit marks the beginning of a new era for both our peoples." The negotiations were tense, the weight of centuries of conflict hanging heavy in the air. But Quasar emerged as a surprising advocate for peace, his words passionate and persuasive. "We have seen what we can achieve when we stand together," he argued, his eyes locking with those of the human delegates. "The Zorgons nearly destroyed us both. Only in unity can we hope to survive." But even as progress was made, Joseph couldn't shake a sense of unease. He noticed the glares of some Betazoid generals, the whispered conversations that ceased when he drew near. And then, in a moment of chaos, everything changed. Alarms blared through the council chambers. Betazoid soldiers, led by a fierce warrior named Orcs, stormed in, weapons drawn. They seized the High Council members, holding them at gunpoint. "Harassing with humans is a weakness," Orcs bellowed, his eyes blazing with fury. "The Betazoids are meant to conquer, to rule. We will not bow to this false peace." Joseph's mind raced, years of tactical training kicking into gear. He couldn't let this happen, couldn't let the fragile peace they had worked so hard to build be shattered. He caught Quasar's eye across the room, saw the same determination mirrored there. With a barely perceptible nod, they sprang into action. Joseph and a group of loyal Betazoid soldiers, who had anticipated such treachery, launched a daring infiltration. They crept through service tunnels and ventilation shafts, closing in on the council chambers from all sides. At Joseph's signal, they burst in, weapons ready, but Joseph held up a hand, staying their trigger fingers. He stepped forward, locking eyes with Korax. "Is this what Betazoid strength looks like?" he asked, his voice ringing through the chamber. "Threatening your own leaders? Clinging to a war that will destroy us all?" He saw doubt flicker in the eyes of some of Korax's followers. He pressed on, his words passionate and unyielding. True strength lies in cooperation, in understanding, in building a future together, not tearing each other apart. For a long, tense moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, Korax's followers began to lower their weapons. Korax himself stood rigid, his face twisted with rage. But he was alone now, his coup crumbling around him. Betazoid security forces flooded in, securing the room and taking Korax into custody. Joseph let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. As the council members were freed and order was restored, Joseph couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. Months ago, he had seen the Betazoids as nothing more than enemies to be destroyed, but now he had stood side by side with them, had fought for a shared future. It was a powerful reminder, he thought, of the importance of diplomacy, of the need to build bridges even with those we once called enemies. For in a galaxy filled with threats, with Zorgons and others who would see them all conquered, strength could only be found in unity. The peace talks resumed, the shock of the attempted coup galvanizing both sides. Agreements were reached, treaties signed. A new chapter was beginning, one of cooperation and shared purpose. As Joseph boarded the shuttle back to his ship, Quasar clasped his shoulder. "You have shown me the true meaning of strength today, Commander," he said solemnly. "I will not forget it." Joseph nodded, a smile touching his lips. "Nor will I forget what we have achieved here. Let it be the foundation of a lasting peace." The shuttle lifted off, carrying Joseph back to the stars, back to the war that still raged. But he carried with him a new hope, a belief that even the deepest of divides could be bridged. For in the end they were all part of the same galaxy, all facing the same threats, and only together could they hope to overcome them. As the ink dried on the historic alliance between humans and Betazoids, Joseph allowed himself a moment of hope. The war had taken a heavy toll on both their peoples, but perhaps now, united, they could forge a path towards lasting peace. That hope was shattered mere days later. Joseph was jolted awake by the blare of alarms, red lights flashing across his quarters. He barely had time to throw on his uniform before his comm crackled to life. "Commander Simpson to the bridge. We're under attack." He raced through the corridors, crew members rushing past him to their battle stations. As he burst onto the bridge, his blood ran cold. The view screen was filled with the sight of Zorgon warships, their angular hulls bristling with weapons. They were everywhere, dropping out of hyperspace like a swarm of locusts. "What's our status?" Joseph barked, taking his seat in the command chair. His tactical officer shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "They're hitting us everywhere, sir. Earth, Beta Z, our colonies. It's a full-scale invasion." Joseph clenched his fists, his mind racing. How had the Zorgons managed this? They had been on the brink of defeat, their forces scattered. And yet here they were, launching an offensive that would have taken years to plan and coordinate. As reports flooded in, a chilling picture began to emerge. The Zorgons had infiltrated both human and Betazoid intelligence networks, planting spies and saboteurs at the highest levels. They had used the chaos of the war to position their fleets, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And strike they did. Human and Betazoid ships fell before the onslaught, outmatched and outmaneuvered at every turn. The Zorgons seemed to anticipate their every move, countering defenses and exploiting weaknesses with uncanny precision. Joseph gripped the armrests of his chair, knuckles white. They were losing this fight, and losing it badly. If they didn't find a way to turn the tide, and soon, there might not be a human or Betazoid civilization left to save. A priority message blinked on his console. It was from Quasar. Joseph opened the channel, the Betazoid leader's face appearing on the screen. He looked haggard, his eyes haunted. "Joseph," Quasar said, his voice strained. "We're being slaughtered. The Zorgons, they're everywhere. We need to find out how they're doing this, and fast." Joseph nodded grimly. "Agreed. I'm assembling a joint task force, our best and brightest. We'll get to the bottom of this, Quasar. We have to." The task force convened on a secure station, hidden deep in the heart of an asteroid field. Human and Betazoid scientists pored over the data, searching for any clue to the Zorgon's newfound power. It was Quasar who found the lead they needed. A pattern in the Zorgon attacks, a series of coordinates that kept repeating. He brought it to Joseph, excitement and dread warring in his eyes. "A research station," Quasar said, pointing to a holographic map. "Heavily guarded deep in Zorgon space. Whatever they're doing there, it's the key to all this." Joseph studied the map, his jaw set. A research station. It made sense. The Zorgon's sudden technological leap, their ability to strike with such precision, it had to be something new, something they had developed in secret. He looked up, meeting Quasar's gaze. In that moment, he saw not the fierce Betazoid warrior he had once fought against, but a trusted ally, a friend. They had come so far, the two of them, from enemies to comrades in arms. "Then that's where we're going," Joseph said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll take a small team, infiltrate the station, find out what the Zorgons are up to and put a stop to it." It was a desperate plan, a last roll of the dice. But as Joseph and Quasar prepared their strike team, as they armed themselves for what could well be their final mission, Joseph felt a strange sense of calm. They would succeed, or they would die trying. For their people, for the future they had fought so hard to build. The Zorgon research station loomed before them, a twisted mass of metal and darkness. Joseph and Quasar led their team through the airlock, weapons at the ready. They had fought their way through the station's outer defenses, but the real challenge lay ahead. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound the hum of distant machinery. They moved cautiously, checking each corner, each shadow. The Zorgons knew they were here. It was only a matter of time before they struck. And strike they did. Zorgon soldiers poured from the darkness, their weapons spitting streams of searing energy. Joseph and his team fought back, the tight confines of the station turning the battle into a brutal close-quarters brawl. They pushed forward inch by bloody inch, leaving a trail of Zorgon bodies in their wake. And then at last, they reached the heart of the station, the research labs. What they found there made Joseph's blood run cold. Wormhole generators, dozens of them, each one capable of tearing a hole in the fabric of space-time, and there, in the center of it all, an ancient device, pulsing with an eerie green light. Quasar stepped forward, his face ashen. "By the gods," he whispered. "The Zorgons, they've done it. They've reverse-engineered the precursor wormhole technology." Joseph stared at the device, realization dawning. With this, the Zorgons could strike anywhere, anytime. No defense could stop them. No fleet could match their speed. They would be unstoppable. Unless... Joseph turned to Quasar, a plan forming in his mind. A desperate plan, a plan that could well mean their deaths. But it was the only way. "We have to destroy it," he said, his voice grim. "The device, the generators, all of it. We blow this station and we cripple their wormhole network." Quasar nodded, his eyes hardening with resolve. "Then let's do it." They moved quickly, planting explosives, setting the timers. The Zorgons fought back with every step, desperate to protect their prize. But Joseph and Quasar were relentless, driven by a determination that bordered on madness. As the final charges were set, as the countdown ticked towards 0, Joseph found himself face to face with a Zorgon commander. The alien towered over him, its eyes filled with hatred. "So think you've won, human?" it snarled, its voice dripping with venom. "You've only delayed the inevitable. We will crush you, crush your pathetic alliance. The galaxy will be ours." Joseph smiled, a hard, bitter smile. "Maybe," he said, his finger hovering over the detonator, "but not today." He pressed the button, and the world went white. Joseph came to in the wreckage of his shuttle, alarms blaring in his ears. He pulled himself from the twisted metal, every bone in his body aching. Beside him, Quasar stirred, his face covered in blood. They had done it. The Zorgon research station was gone, reduced to atoms. The wormhole network was crippled, the Zorgon advance halted. For now. But as Joseph looked out at the stars, As he saw the distant flashes of battle still raging, he knew their fight was far from over. The Zorgons would regroup, would find new ways to strike at them. And he and Quasar would be there to meet them. Two warriors forged in the crucible of war, united by a bond that transcended species and creed. Together, they would stand against the darkness, for their peoples, for the dream of a galaxy at peace. No matter the cost. Joseph and Quasar fought their way through the twisted corridors of the Zorgon command center, the sounds of battle echoing around them. Human and Betazoid strike teams clashed with Zorgon defenders, energy weapons flashing in the gloom. Joseph ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled over his head, then returned fire, dropping the Zorgon soldier with a well-placed shot. Quasar was a blur of motion beside him, his blade flashing as he cut through the Zorgons with deadly precision. Together they pressed forward, their objective clear, the wormhole generator complex at the heart of the base. They burst into the central chamber, weapons ready. But what they saw there made them pause. Standing before the pulsing mass of the wormhole generator was Xyloth, the Zorgon operative who had once held Quasar captive. He turned to face them, a cruel smile on his alien features. "Welcome," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "You've played your parts well, but the game is over now." Joseph aimed his rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger. "It's over, Xyloth. Your wormhole network is finished." But Xyloth only laughed, a sound that sent chills down Joseph's spine. "You still don't understand, do you? I'm not a Zorgon. None of this was ever about the Zorgons." He stepped forward, his form shimmering, changing. His Zorgon features melted away, replaced by something else, something utterly alien. "I am Mysteron," he said, his voice resonating with power. "And we have been pulling the strings from the beginning." Joseph's mind reeled. The Mysterons, a fourth race, one that had been manipulating them all. Xyloth smiled at their shock, his alien eyes glinting. "We feed on chaos, on conflict," he said. "The war between your races, the Zorgons. It was all our design, weakening you, making you ripe for conquest." Rage boiled up in Joseph's gut. All the death, all the destruction, it had all been for this. He raised his weapon, but Xyloth was faster. A blast of energy caught Joseph in the chest, sending him flying. Quasar leaped forward, his blade flashing. He and Xyloth fought, a deadly dance of steel and energy. Joseph struggled to his feet, his chest burning. He saw Xyloth's blade arc towards him, saw Quasar leap into its path. The Betazoid leader took the blow meant for Joseph, the energy blade piercing his chest. Quasar fell, his lifeblood pooling on the cold metal floor. Joseph caught him, cradling his former enemy in his arms. Quasar gripped his hand, his eyes fierce despite the pain. "Destroy it," he gasped, his voice ragged. "Destroy the generator, expose their plot, unite our peoples, it's the only way." His eyes closed, his hand going slack in Joseph's. A cry of rage and grief tore from Joseph's throat. He laid Quasar down gently, then turned to face Xyloth, his eyes burning with righteous fury. The Mysteron raised his blade, but Joseph was already moving. He snatched up Quasar's fallen sword and charged, a battle cry on his lips. Their blades clashed in a shower of sparks, Joseph pouring all his grief, all his rage into every blow. With a final desperate lunge, he drove his blade into Xyloth's chest. The Mysteron staggered back, dark ichor spilling from the wound. Joseph didn't hesitate. He turned to the wormhole generator and plunged the sword into its pulsing heart. The generator exploded in a blaze of light and heat, the shockwave throwing Joseph across the room. Around him the base shuddered, alarms screaming as the wormhole network collapsed. Joseph dragged himself to his feet, staggering to Quasar's side. He lifted the fallen Betazoid leader into his arms, tears streaking his face. He activated his comm, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Joseph Simpson," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "The Zorgons were puppets. The true enemy is the Mysterons. They orchestrated this war, manipulated us all. But no more." He looked down at Quasar's still face, a new resolve hardening in his heart. From this day forward we stand united. Human, Betazoid, Zorgon, we fight together. For Quasar. For all of us. Joseph strode from the collapsing base, Quasar's body in his arms, his message echoing across the stars. A new war had begun, a war against the true enemy. And he would be on the front lines, leading the charge. The Galactic Coalition was born from the ashes of war, a testament to the resilience and unity of the races that had once been bitter enemies. Joseph stood at the forefront of this alliance, his leadership and bravery a beacon of hope in the darkness. He gathered his team, a diverse group of humans, Betazoids, and even reformed Zorgons, united in their determination to stop the Mysterons. They pored over intelligence reports, piecing together the puzzle of the Mysterons' plans. A pattern emerged, whispers of a secret base hidden in the swirling depths of the Kalidasa Nebula. Joseph knew they had to act fast. He assembled a strike team, the best of the best, and they set out into the unknown. Their ship, the GCS Resolute, cut through the nebula's murky clouds, sensors straining to penetrate the interference. Suddenly, the base loomed before them, a twisted mass of alien metal and pulsing energy. They docked, silently, and crept through the eerie corridors. Strange symbols glowed on the walls, the air thick with an unsettling hum. They reached the heart of the base, a cavernous chamber pulsing with malevolent energy, and there in the center was the horrifying truth. Rows upon rows of hyperspace resonance bombs, each capable of tearing a hole in the fabric of reality. The Mysterons' plan became clear. They meant to plunge the universe into eternal chaos. Joseph's hand shook as he transmitted the dire news back to Coalition Command. They had to stop this at any cost. A plan formed, desperate and daring. The Coalition would assemble a fleet, equipped with experimental hyperspace dampeners to contain the blasts, but they needed time. Joseph stepped forward, his eyes hard with resolve. He would lead a mission to the Mysteron homeworld, to sabotage their bomb production and buy the fleet the time it needed. He knew it was a suicide mission, but as he looked around at his team, at the determined faces of those who had once been his enemies, he knew there was no other choice. They would do this for the sake of all life in the galaxy. They would stand united in the face of annihilation. As the Resolute set course for the Mysteron homeworld, Joseph sat in his quarters, his thoughts heavy with the weight of what was to come. He thought of Quasar, of the sacrifice he had made. He thought of the billions of lives hanging in the balance. He squared his shoulders, his jaw set with determination. Whatever happened, he would face it head-on for the Coalition, for the future. The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace, the twisted spires of the Mysteron homeworld rising before them like a nightmare made real. Joseph gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. "Take us in," he ordered, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "It's time to end this." The Resolute hurtled through the inky void, its destination clear, the Mysteron homeworld. Joseph stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen, his mind racing with the weight of what lay ahead. He turned to his team, a mix of humans, Betazoids, and Zorgons, united in their resolve. "This is it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. "Everything we've fought for, everything we've lost, it all comes down to this." The ship shuddered as it entered the planet's atmosphere, the twisted spires of Mysteron cities rising before them. Joseph led his team through the winding streets, the eerie silence broken only by the pounding of their hearts. They reached the bomb production facility, a looming monstrosity of alien metal and pulsing energy. Joseph divided his team, sending them to plant explosives at key points, while he and a select few made their way to the heart of the complex. As they crept through the labyrinthine corridors, a sudden alarm pierced the air. The Mysterons had discovered them. Joseph cursed under his breath, urging his team to move faster. They burst into the central chamber, only to be met by a horde of Mysteron soldiers. Blaster fire filled the air, the acrid smell of ozone mingling with the coppery tang of blood. Joseph and his team fought with everything they had, taking down Mysteron after Mysteron, but they just kept coming, an endless tide of enemies. One by one, Joseph's comrades fell. He watched in horror as a Betazoid soldier took a blast to the chest, as a human marine was cut down by a Mysteron blade. Still, they fought on, even as hope dwindled. Soon only Joseph remained, his rifle empty, his body battered and bruised. He staggered into the heart of the chamber, where a figure awaited him. It was the Oracle, the enigmatic leader of the Mysterons. Its form was shrouded in shadow, its voice a sibilant whisper. "You fight bravely, Joseph Simpson," it said almost mockingly, "but you fight in vain. The galaxy must be cleansed of the impure, the unworthy. Only then can the Mysterons ascend to our rightful place." Joseph spat blood, his eyes blazing with defiance. "You're insane," he growled. "Billions will die." The Oracle laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Billions of lesser beings, their lives are meaningless, only the Mysterons matter." Joseph looked around at the destruction, at the bodies of his fallen comrades. He knew what he had to do. With a last desperate surge of strength, he lunged for the detonator. The Oracle screeched, lashing out with tendrils of dark energy. But it was too late. Joseph slammed his fist down on the button, a grim smile on his face. The world went white. The explosions ripped through the facility, a chain reaction of destruction. Joseph was thrown back, his body broken, but his mission complete. From orbit, the Galactic Coalition fleet watched as the Mysteron homeworld buckled and heaved, the hyperspace dampeners straining to contain the catastrophic energies. And then it was over. The Mysterons were gone, their plan thwarted at the cost of countless lives, including Joseph's own. But even as his life slipped away, Joseph knew it had been worth it. The galaxy would live on, free from the Mysteron threat. The alliance he had forged would endure. His story had come to an end, but the story of the galaxy, of the unity he had fought for, that story was just beginning. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.